At this point, I'd like to turn over the floor to my co-host, Dr. Asuncion Raimundo, who will introduce our next line of speakers and also host the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Concepcion. And I'd like to greet everybody, most especially the biologists in the group, specifically those from the Institute of Biological Sciences. I can see there are a number of you there, including our Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Anyway, I'm sure you're waiting for the next speaker because you know her very well. She has been our faculty member at IBS for some time before she went to the States for her PhD. University, a small private liberal arts college located in New York. Prior to, she had faculty positions at Alfred and the University of Pittsburgh. She obtained her bachelor's in biology at UP Los Baños and graduated with a PhD in comparative biochemistry at the University of California, Berkeley. She has worked extensively as a biomedical researcher, working on the molecular biology and genomics of malaria of soil and plant roots with application to agriculture.
Well, hello, everyone. I would like to thank you for giving me this time to present, and greetings from the United States. So I will just be sharing my screen and then maybe giving you some of my experiences when I had to shift teaching online here in the United States. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Saliba-Tarun, and I'm an assistant professor at St. Lawrence University. I will be presenting on rethinking the biology lab courses for online instruction. But before I go on, I just want to thank the organizers for inviting me to present on this topic and to congratulate PAASE and APAMS on their 40th anniversary. All agree that science laboratory courses are essential because not only does it provide hands-on instruction, but they also engage the students and deepen their understanding of scientific concepts. But there are many challenges to online lab instruction, some of which are listed here. Primarily, there is a problem in that we really cannot offer hands-on experiences because the students will not have access to particular lab instruments or equipments. They will not be able to carry out their experiments, which means that they cannot collect data, they cannot learn how to troubleshoot, and they will not be able to participate in field trips, and group work is going to be more difficult. So how do we overcome these challenges? Our guiding philosophy would be less is more. In teaching online, and this is not something unique to teaching labs, we really have to go down to the basics, identify key course objectives, and based on these objectives, we then can choose and create the learning experiences that we would like our students to have. So going back to what we want to teach students in labs, I've listed some of the core objectives, which includes not only hands-on skills in instrumentation, but more so in really deepening the understanding of students and letting them apply the process of science. This is in experimental design, data collection, data analysis, group work, and in the process, deepen their understanding of science content and concepts, and also communication skills in presenting experiments and results. Now, if you look at this list, really, almost all of these can be achieved online. And the main thing that is difficult would be hands-on skills and instrumentation. Now, to think about how we're going to redesign our courses, we would then use backward design model. So we've already talked about identifying desired learning outcomes. And this will then guide us in determining how we assess the students and whether they've achieved these learning goals. And based on the first two, we can then start selecting or creating desired learning experiences for our students. But there is a increased challenge with teaching online in that we have to be cognizant of the constraints that technology and resources impose on online teaching. So we have to be aware that not everyone has equal accessibility for online courses. So there's differences or variations in the availability of internet, also the technology that's available to faculty and students. We also have to determine whether we have to do synchronous or asynchronous instruction, and the mode of course deliveries. Now, how do we do laboratory science at a distance? I've listed some of the ways and resources that we can achieve this. So some of these, it would include citizen science projects, virtual labs and simulations, which probably will be the closest thing for teaching students specific skills or experiences working with particular instruments. And for working with data, the students can use experimental data with instructor videos. And to give them some hands-on learning, they can do this with home-based experiments. So citizen science projects are becoming popular. These are research, so this is actual research facilitated by people-powered data. So there are two sites that I've listed here. iNaturalist, where you can basically upload observations using your phone with the GPS coordinates, and these observations are then shared with fellow naturalists. You can discuss your findings. You can use the data from the database to do some research. Now, another one is the Zooniverse site. So Zooniverse, most of the data is looking at digitized data or digitized pictures or photographs. And basically, students can be participating in analyzing the data after a little bit of training. So through this process, the students have a taste of contributing to global research projects. Now, citizen science in the Philippines, I've seen some projects, but there certainly could be more. So potential projects would include, for instance, tree or insect identification, or if the students live in the coastline, they can monitor algal blooms or coral bleaching, or even go to the fish market to identify the the different types of marine organisms or fish that are fish from our coastline. Virtual labs, these are this gives you a feel of how lab is done, and it's sort of like um, giving a feel of a video game to the students. So one virtual lab that I've used a lot is the virtual bacterial identification lab that's available at HHMI Biointeractive. So in this virtual lab, the students click on the lab bench and they are prompted to do some activities like streaking bacteria, extracting DNA, doing sequencing and sequencing analysis. And so in the process, the students learn how the process or what the different techniques are used to identify bacterial species. Now, one big limitation or in these online labs is that the students don't learn or don't have a chance to learn some of the skills that we need for being a biologist, like microscopy. So here is a site where the students get acquainted with the binocular microscope. Um, the parts that are in this virtual scope are very similar to the microscope that they use in the lab, and the procedure for getting to focus on a slide essentially is similar to what they would encounter if they were to use this microscope. So by doing this, the students have a chance of a feel of learning how to use the microscope. And I would suggest that for students that will become biology majors, that there has to be some check to ensure that they know some of these skills or some of these microscopy skills before they move on to their other classes. So, for instance, in my course, we decided that we would give badges that ensure that the student has been able to demonstrate that they can use the microscope, or they know some aseptic techniques that are important, or like using a micropipette, so that when they move on to their other classes, the teachers of these other classes know that the students have encountered or have used these techniques in my class. Another site that I've used is learn.cellcollective.org. This is essentially using computer simulation. So many processes in biology are very complex, such as respiration, and it's really important that the students have a feel of this systems approach, where they just don't memorize a pathway, but be able to see how interrelated and complex the regulation of a particular pathway is. So in the simulations, you can control different inputs, and you can see how these different inputs will affect the levels of other substrates or other molecules in the pathway. Using online databases provides a way for students to get acquainted with data obtained with very expensive equipment. So here we have a cell biology database. So we have pictures of highly digitized three-dimensional images of human cells.
At the Allen Institute for Cell Science, we're diving deep into this first step of observation by building 3D atlases of whole cells.
So what this database allows the students is that they're able to use that database to design or to analyze them, even do some experiments. So there is a published paper on using this database to study cell division. So there are also online lab modules. Some of them are paid subscriptions, but this one by Symbio is available for free, and this provides a way for students to understand the COVID pandemic, the SIR model for disease infection. Now, if field trips cannot be done, then we can bring the field trip to the students, essentially giving them a view of the site, pointing out what's important in those sites, using these virtual field trips with worksheets to help the students understand what is important or what you're trying to show in the particular location. Now, home-based labs would be a way for students to have a hands-on feel on doing experiments. So this would use accessible materials, relate them to a particular scientific concept. For instance, making yogurt at home. Not only is yogurt something you want to eat, but understanding the science, the microbiology, the role of microbes in fermentation, they can relate what they're doing to actual science concepts that they're learning. Here's another technique that I use in my ecology labs. So this uses the pitfall traps, using paper cups or plastic cups, and they can then capture insects or whatever microorganisms fall in these traps, and they can do diversity studies. They can test differences in insect diversity at different types of locations. So for recommendations, it's really important that we assess connectivity and technology that is available to the faculty and students before we start thinking about redesigning our course. And then we use backward design to guide in designing the course. And then we select labs, open-ended labs with worksheets for students to work through. And we can encourage group work by using forums and data sharing using Google Docs. Hands-on experiences through home-based experiments or citizen science projects would be a way for engaging the students and giving them a hands-on feel, even though they are working online. Thank you so much, and I have included a list of references at the end of this presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tarun. I think I'm sure the biologists in the group learned a lot from you, and they must be eager for those list of links and references that you mentioned in your talk. Anyway, there are quite a number of questions here on the chat. May we know where we can access the simulation of cellular regulation form from?
Also, all the links that I put on the slides, actually, that is where you're going to get to those particular resources. And most of those links, well, the resources I've chosen, they're all free. And you really just have to test them to see if it will work with your computer, and really to also, ask this, maybe survey your students on what kind of technology is available. because even here in the United States, when we transitioned to teaching online, we realized that there was a lot of problems with accessibility. We had students who are working in rural areas who do not have very good internet. So that became problematic, and you need to choose resources that will work particularly with, for instance, the cell phone, because everyone has a cell phone, or maybe utilize things like Facebook, which everyone has an account on, or use YouTube videos. So all the links, they should be available to everyone.
Thank you, Alice. Here's another question from Dr. Aimee Dupo. Can you share with us some tips in designing learning experiences that prevent students from feeling shortchanged with these constraints in remote teaching and learning?
So what I've learned, because I'm also new to teaching online, is that you really should be present socially, and also be attentive to your students. So it's not just sending them a link or just posting a YouTube video. In fact, they would prefer that you are the one lecturing. So even though there are those high quality videos on YouTube, you should use that sparingly, and make sure that you are showing, you're also teaching, because they feel that if you just keep giving them links or giving them handouts to read, that you really are not teaching. It's also important that you engage them by giving them activities that allow them to apply what they're learning. And with regards to assessment, it's very difficult to do assessment online because it's so easy for students to get the answer from Google. So what you have to do is to come up with questions where you ask them to apply what they're learning, something that is very specific, so that they cannot just copy the answer from Google. Also, when I said open-ended labs, they are the best type of labs because it allows them to be creative. It allows them to, to participate in the process of doing experiments and collecting data, not just something that they already know the answer. So what I've been trying to do in all my labs is basically remove all cookie cutter labs and just select laboratory experiments where the students are part of the process of collecting data and designing experiments.
Okay, one simple question from Dr. Cadiz. How long would a virtual lab last?
Because all the experiments are done asynchronously, you basically give instructions to the students on what they need to do, and they can do it in their own time. And you will then have them maybe take a picture so that you know that they've accomplished what you want them to do, and complete a worksheet. I try to do group work, so that's why I said Google Docs, so that they can still participate in group work even though they're online.
Okay, thank you. There are quite a number of questions left, but then just one last question from Dr. Concepcion. Why don't you show yourself and unmute yourself, Giselle, and ask your question to Alice? Giselle is not listening. Anyway, we'll go back to more questions after we're finished with the other two speakers. Then we may have a question for all the panelists, okay? Thank you very much, Alice, and we'll get back to you after the other speakers have presented theirs. Okay,